Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I'm your host, Kimberly D'Souza. This week, we're going to be staying on the topic of health with a specific focus on non-communicable diseases. And so joining me in studio is the Chief Nutritionist and Head of the Nutrition and Metabolism Department at the Ministry of Health, Ms. Michelle Ash, and NCD Specialist, Chronic Care Coordinator, Dr. Anushka Bisoon Pustam. Good evening, ladies, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
Thanks.
us.
Same here.
Now, Dr. Bisoon, I'm going to begin with you first. So as we know, TNT has the largest number of NCDs in the region. What are the latest figures thus far?
So, first of all, I'd say I wouldn't say that we have the largest. From my research and recent readings, looking at public health publications recently, I acknowledge that we do have a high incidence of NCDs within the country, but we're actually not the highest in the region. But so far, we have, from the PAHO 2019 country study, we have our highest prevalence of NCDs would be in ischemic heart disease, or as you know, cardiovascular diseases, followed closely by diabetes. Now, this is without kidney complications and other diabetic-related complications. Then we have things like stroke, we have things like kidney diseases, prostate cancer and breast cancer follow closely after that. And these are the highest prevalence rates of morbidity and mortality. Morbidity and mortality really is how diseases affect us and how we die or how fatal they are. So from the 2012 PAHO study, this is a STEP survey that was conducted in Trinidad and Tobago. The prevalence of hypertension was seen to be about 27%, and that for diabetes from the International Diabetes Foundation is about 14%. Now, these figures are a bit old, measure that. But that aside, we're looking at a holistic approach. That is the approach that we want to look at. It's first of all a life course approach. So we're looking at from even before conception. So women who are in their fertile ages, asking them to maintain good health, watch their blood pressures, watch their sugar levels, watch their weight, ensure that they're healthy pre-conception so that during pregnancy they maintain that. And then even after, once it starts from that early, you tend to find that there is a lot of focus personally to want to be healthy, right? So that's one thing, a life course approach. But the other major thing is to adopt a whole of government, whole of society approach. Everybody's responsible for everybody's health. So we're looking at not just the Ministry of Health, how can we collaborate with other ministries, Ministry of Education, focus on school children, Ministry of Agriculture, focusing on food, etc., but also the whole of society. So we're looking at NGOs, we're looking at, let's say, the distributors, the persons who sell food, things like that, so that everybody, the onus and the responsibilities are on everyone for the health of the country.
Now, I know that Dr. Bisoon would have touched on it, Ms. Ash, but who are some of the most vulnerable groups for these NCDs?
Okay, so in terms of NCDs, there's actually something called the social determinants of health that actually affect where exactly you would find the most chronic diseases. So, for example, sometimes they may have specific areas where there's a certain, type of culture there. Maybe they don't have access to healthcare. So those types of groups will be the most at risk for chronic diseases, for example. So, but we can also supply some further breakdown of statistics. But as we were saying, that some of these statistics are a bit dated. Most of the recent statistics we have is like about 2012 or so. In terms of how often the data is collected, roughly every 10 years or so. We had a little bit of a hiccup when the pandemic started. So at this point, I think it was like 2010 to 2011, I think the last survey was done. So we're actually due to commence the next step survey very soon. So that's actually in the works already.
Now, while the data is dated, of course, do you remember exactly which area may be more prone to these sorts of NCD than others?
Okay, so there was a collaborative study done with the Ministry of Health in collaboration with the UNDP, I think back in 2011 as well. And they also looked at the social determinants of health as well as geographical location. So we do have high amounts of chronic diseases in certain districts, actually. So, for example, we have high amount of chronic disease, for example, in our Rema district, as well as the Princestown DB district as well. Let's start with Penal DB region. We found that we have a lot of high cholesterol in such regions because, well, a popular thing, we have the DB strip, right? The DB strip, they sell bygony pies, plenty, fried delicacies that are near and dear to our hearts here locally and culturally. So we do acknowledge maybe some of the eating patterns. We need to put a little bit more educational focus with regards to maybe changing up some of the recipes, a little bit more education to the kids coming up from infants. Dr. Bisoon was talking about even primordial prevention, where you speak with the pregnant and the breastfeeding mothers. So as early as possible, you get that intervention, you get change from jump.
If people know that they're at risk for NCDs, how soon should they start paying attention to their health?
As early as possible. We really want persons to take that approach in seeing about their own care, even before you get to the health center. So, for example, from baby to mother, father, sister, brother, we want everybody to start looking at their health as early as possible. So we're talking about diet, exercise, stress management, taking care of your mental health, as well as even things such as spiritual development may assist with your overall holistic health.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, Ms. Ash, we've heard the conversation about how you have to have your plate looking, right, with fruits and veggies and all that. But as we look towards a cost-effective way to do this, give me an example of what, let's say, lunch may look like if we're thinking healthy options. Is it going to be a mix of provision and veggies? How is it going to look?
Okay, so what we normally say is you can use the 6 Caribbean food groups to actually plan what is a balanced meal. So, for example, I'll give you like a general template. So everybody's needs is a little bit different. This is not an individual prescription or anything like that, but we're talking general public health. You want to divide your plate, a 9-inch diameter plate, in half. So half the plate will be in vegetables. Just a quarter of the plate will be what we call the staple foods, and that will be your complex carbohydrates, starchy foods, and so on. We're not saying don't eat starch. We'll tell you exactly why we have certain things in the different parts of the plate. And then the last quarter of the plate will be dedicated to your higher protein items. We're talking your peas, beans, and so on, as well as your meats, fish, poultry, etc. So we would generally recommend that particular plate method for making a balanced lunch, for example, or a dinner meal, right? We have like a little different mix for breakfast. But generally, if you're looking for a balance, you always start off with your veggies first, because we recommend, PAHO recommends for a good healthy diet, at least 5 servings of both fruits and vegetables for the day. And we do know that Trinidad and Tobago has fallen short in the servings of vegetables and fruits for the day. Most of us have way less than 5 servings of both fruits and vegetables. I think it was about 91% the last time that we checked that are not eating our veggies and fruits. If you're portioning out starches, you'll want to look at a half cup or pot spoon measurement as your guide.
And what is an example of the starches that you're thinking of?
It could be any amount of, it could be different types of ground provision, a mix of, because, we include like in the blue food category, generally, we like plantain, green or the ripe plantain as well, breadfruits. All of those things are extremely, extremely nutritious. So if you're doing like a nice ground provision mix saute, stick with that. Let that be your only starch. You could cook like a variety of veggies, right? You could do a salad. You could do like a nice stir fry. And then maybe you can do maybe some grilled fish or whatever have you on the side for the meats as well. And you can do peas and beans still.
Now, when we're looking at the cost effectiveness, is there a more affordable option that people can also look out for as well?
Yes. So, tricks of the trade, generally, if you want to save money, utilize your markets. Your markets are your best friend. We have a lot more accessible markets now. We have farmers markets through our NAMDEFCO initiatives as well. They have a lot of good deals, but you really have to go early in the market. If you go late in the market, you know you're not going to get the deals. Don't go after 10 and stuff like that. Go early, right? And they have postings about when all of the markets are, etc. And what you can also do is just look at we're coming into a time where economic times are getting a little difficult. You may want to look at maybe even some frozen items for convenience for certain families and their lifestyle. If you can't always buy fresh, the next best bet is frozen. It's not always as nutritious in terms of all the canned vegetables and stuff all the time, but you will get more nutrition out of the frozen items. And you can go to the market and freeze your own stuff too. Put it away, make sure you wrap it, and you blanch your veggies and stuff before you freeze it. You will maintain a lot of the nutritional value as well.
Nice. Now, Dr. Bisun, I'm going to bring you back in. So we have basically what we can do to sort of prevent the diseases. But even before we get there, what are some of the signs that you can look out for to see if you're at risk for actually getting one of these NCDs?
Okay, so there are a myriad of NCDs. So, there are a lot of different conditions. So each of the conditions would actually present differently. So, for example, if you're a diabetic, you want to look for things like increased taste, increased urination, weight loss initially, increased hunger, increased fatigue, things like that. For hypertension or high blood pressure, you're looking at things like headaches, blurry vision, dizziness. Some people get nauseous. Some people actually vomit when the pressures are very high. But it's very specific to the conditions themselves. Now, what I usually tell my patients, if you don't feel right, get yourself checked. We have lots of public facilities. Each region has numerous health centers. They welcome patients in to do screening, to do checks. Healthy people, usually I would recommend that they do checks twice a year, just basic checks. And of course, if you are unsure, the Ministry of Health's website has a lot of information about some of these chronic diseases. We've recently started to blast on social media. So there are a lot of posts on the website as well as the social media platforms so that you have a lot of information. What are these things that we're looking for? What are the blood tests that we usually request? Things like that. And why do we do it? What are the normal and abnormal values? So I do encourage the population to utilize these resources. Go online, look. And of course, I always tell people when you look online, look at reliable sources. That's why I'm stressing on the Ministry of Health's website, because we vet and we make sure that whatever information we put out there is actually accurate.
Right. Now, some of the symptoms that you mentioned, how early do they manifest?
They can manifest very early in some populations. Some individuals, some people, they take quite a while, meaning that, let's take diabetes, for example. Some people may have very high sugars and not know because they're not presenting with it. Likewise, other people may have mildly elevated and they would have symptoms. It all depends on the person. So basically, you can't really tell. I can't tell you that, okay, this population A, would have these symptoms and would present earlier than population B. So that's why I said, if you know your bodies, if you know that there's something that just doesn't feel right, get checked, get tested.
Now, while it does depend on the individual or the population, would you say that there are some groups that are more vulnerable than others? So, for example, pregnant women, for example.
Of course, there are always more vulnerable groups. Yeah. And so you mentioned pregnant women. Yes, pregnant women are very vulnerable for diabetes and high blood pressure in pregnancy, which is why before I spoke about making sure that your bodies are actually healthy and primed before conception. So we want to look at moving away from the sickness model to more of a health and wellness model. Now, coming back to your question again, in terms of vulnerability, our two main ethnic groups in Trinidad and Tobago, East Indians and Africans, and East Indians are very prone to diabetes, heart disease, things like that. The African population is very prone to hypertension and stroke. So just genetically, our population is at a lot higher risk than other countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that you jumped on that, because my next question was going to be, is it age or are the diseases rather, are they age or illness discriminatory? So will they affect one group or one gender even different from others?
So while there is a genetic predisposition for some of them, it's actually not registered like that, meaning anybody could get anything. And we see NCDs, non-communicable diseases, occur in bunches, meaning that you have co-diseases, you have comorbidities. That's where that word comes from. We hear it a lot. We heard it a lot during the pandemic. Comorbidities, having more than one. So you usually tend to find that somebody with diabetes may have high blood pressure. They may have high cholesterol as well. So these things actually occur together. So no, there isn't really statistically a difference in terms of the ethnicities or the age groups, etc. But we do know that genetically some people are more predispositioned or at risk of getting certain diseases. Well, women tend to have a lot more body fat just because that's how we're made up. We have to carry babies. We tend to pack on a lot more of the fat, and fat tends to shoot up your cholesterols. You tend to want to look at diabetes and that weight control, things like that. So women sometimes can be slightly more at risk for certain things, as well as men. They seem to be more at risk for hypertension, stroke, those types of diseases.
Okay. Now, coming back to you, Ms. Ash, what are some of the key components of being healthy? I love that you mentioned the mental health and wellness, and I don't think we talk about that enough. So what can we say is really the key to a healthy lifestyle?
The key to a healthy lifestyle, you have a couple things. I just put in a little tidbit there. And what I wanted to include in that tidbit, yes, we talk about diet, exercise, stress management, mental health. Not smoking is a big factor as well, and as well as sleep, making sure you get enough sleep, right? Simple things, drinking water, making sure you meet that requirement for the day, your 8 glasses or 2.5 liters of water a day. So those are like just the basics of where we start on off a healthy lifestyle.
Now, Ms. Ash, some people may argue that I smoke occasionally or I take the occasional glass of wine. I mean, is that also considered healthy or finding a balance in how you manage your life?
So in terms of smoking and alcohol consumption, both are actually highly associated with, of course, cancers. And the data is not just yesterday. We've been hearing it for decades now. So once you start smoking, you increase your risk for cancers as well as hypertension, right? Smokers also, if they are male, they tend to have sexual health problems as well, right? And that's related to the hypertension as well, right? So we do have a lot, in terms of the alcohol as well. Culturally, sugarcane plantations were here. We started to process the sugar and make rum. So it is really an ingrained part of our culture, alcohol consumption, and at the higher amounts. Because, even from conception and then you have pregnancy, child is born. What you do when your child bawling and screaming and crying? Long time people used to say, put a little brandy in the bottle, right? We do not encourage that whatsoever, right? What you're doing is really inculcating that taste very early for alcohol consumption. You even have to watch exactly certain alcohol containing ingredients. Our local bitters, right, that we use to put in our beverages and stuff. It is actually 40% alcohol by volume. So when you use that in your juices and your beverages and you give it to your kids, you may be giving them a little bit of the alcohol taste as well. So we want to just, watch your labels, read correctly, and so on. But alcohol is also linked to cancers as well, particularly breast cancers for women too. So any amount of alcohol consumption actually increases your risk for cancer, right? But if you do drink alcohol, please do so with extreme moderation. What we found is we have a lot of binge drinking type of behaviors locally here. So we're talking about exceeding the recommendations for standard units of alcohol. For men, once they have a drinking episode, they tend to go more than 2 drinks per drinking episode, and women more than 1 standard drink per drinking episode. So beyond that, that's getting beyond our what they call the recommendations for cancer prevention.
Of course. Now, Ms. Ashton, of course, Dr. Bisoon, any one of you can take this question. We've heard prevention is better than cure. but there are some people, unfortunately, they have the NCDs. And so what can they do to make life just a little bit easier to manage now that they have these diseases? And anyone can go first.
Okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Masood?
Great. So I like that question because we are inflicted with NCDs in the population. We're not starting from scratch. We know that there are a lot of people that have it. Some people may have the mentality, well, I already have diabetes. I already have hypertension. What can I do? You can do a lot. You can, as Ms. Ash said, watch your diet, portion control, what to eat, when to eat, how to eat, things like that. You're looking at physical activity. We didn't stress on that enough. Now, a lot of people, it's recommended that you do 30 minutes of moderate exercise a week. I'm not going to tell somebody who does 15 minutes 3 times a week or twice a week that you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Any bit of physical activity is actually better than none. So get active. Now, there are a lot of people who have mobility issues. What are you going to tell them? They can't exercise for 15 minutes a day, do rigorous, moderate exercises. You can't sit on a chair. Some of our RHAs actually implement what we call diabetic support groups, where they have trainers and persons coming in. They sit in their clinics and they do these exercises. These things help. So any form of activity is good. Of course, drinking water is a major, major, major part of it. You want to stay away from too much of these sweetened beverages. Drink a lot of water, and it starts very early. So it starts from your school-age children. I'll give you a personal story. I have a son. He's 3 years old. Sorry. All he drinks is water. He has never tried soda. He's tasted juices, and he says, no, I don't want that. I want water. And he obviously goes for the water because it's how you fashion that mentality. She mentioned stress relief, and I think this is important. We all go through different levels of stress. Having a chronic disease actually brings on mental health issues. It's a part of having a chronic disease. So it's about managing that. I can't say prevent it because it's difficult to prevent. Everybody goes through these periods in their life. So it's about managing it. How can you do it? Simple ways: deep breathing, meditation, yoga, things like that really does help. And it helps the older population. The other thing that we want to do is get away from this polypharmacy. Polypharmacy is taking lots of drugs to combat your NCDs. So we want to be able to go down to one tablet or a combination of a pill. That would help. You would find that there would be better compliance with people when they do things like that. So what we at the ministry are really striving to do is create these evidence-based clinical guidelines where we would implement monotherapy or combination therapy and get away from polypharmacy so that it becomes easier for patients to take their pills. You're already inflicted with it. Let's get away from taking 10 and 12 tablets a day. Let's go for 1 or 2 so that it's easier for them. So I think these are the things that we could do. And you can only do this if you visit your health centers, you keep your doctor's appointments, you let them know, listen, doc, is there something that I can take instead of these medications? Is there one pill that I could take?
Now, Dr. Bisoon, as you mentioned your son, I just remembered that we are going into the July-August vacation. And so the flip side is, how do we wean our children off of the sweets that they will be attracted to now that school is closed?
Yeah, so healthier options. Fruits and veggies. I've seen lots of videos, and I know lots of my colleagues, they actually blend a lot of the fruits. They make popsicles instead of purchasing the commercial popsicles. Instead of going for the sweet snacks, you go for fruits. And you can look at local fruits. You don't have to look at the expensive foreign fruits, the imports. Local fruits, it's mango season, plum season is coming up, so get them into local things, Just a general healthy way of life. Okay, you want to have a soda? Okay, you can have a soda, but you have to go outside and play football for an hour.
Nice.
Compromise.
Ms. Ash, anything you want to add at this point in terms of how we can wean our students off of, the sweet stuff that they are no doubt going to want now that school is closed?
Well, July, August vacation, to me, it is almost a mirror, a smaller microcosm of what we were going through in the lockdown periods when we had in the heights of the pandemic. So we could kind of look at some of those lessons learned. We would have figured out strategies we can do in terms of preparation. For example, you have to do a lot of preparation. You have to have a plan before the kids sit down, before that week starts at home, right? So you want to make sure that you have enough veggies, enough fruit offerings as well, right? You want to make sure and have a plan. Maybe you want to have at least one day you have an outing every week while they're home to make sure that they get out of the house, do something active, and they're not just sitting down doing screen time and so on, right? Screen time is one of the most detrimental parts where it will make you just want to graze all day long, and you're not hungry. It's just a mindless type of behavior. So you want to get away from that as much as possible. If you have to cook, make sure that they get in the kitchen with you too. So that will encourage them to try some of those healthy things. If they're not used to it exactly, try to get them in the kitchen and encourage them to cook with the items, and they will tend to try it because they cooked it. So, so just modeling the behavior as well for yourself. So you cook and you eat too.
Just to piggyback off of what Michelle had said as well, not just getting them involved in the kitchen, let them plant a garden at home. So you have organic foods, but you also cut down your food bill, and they plant their produce, they reap it, and then they cook it. So it's good activities for them, and they carry that on through their lives. You would be surprised.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Bisoon, going back to something that you said, you mentioned the pills, and how many pills somebody may have to take if they have one of these NCDs. I was just wondering if you can delve a bit deeper into the treatment for some of these complications, and let's look at it long-term versus short-term.
Sure. So let's take diabetes, for example. Diabetes, a person comes to you and they're diabetic. They could fall into 3 categories in terms of management. So no medication at all, managed with diet and exercise, lifestyle changes. The second category, slightly higher levels, need a little bit of help. Oral hypoglycemic, so oral medications, you take tablets. And the third one would be when you're very high and you require the additional insulin, which is, the highest level of management. Now, it's not that, I said it before and I'll say it again, it's not that if you're on insulin, it's all doom and gloom and you have to give up. You can always step down. You implement the lifestyle changes. It's a mentality shift. It's very difficult, I know, because when you're accustomed lifestyle, culturally, you're accustomed eating certain foods. It's very difficult, but it just takes that one step just to try something different, cut down the salt in the diet, cut down the amount of sugar, things like that. And you can wean down, So hypertension, we have the HEARTS program, which is a PAHO initiative. And I am actually proud to say that Trinidad has actually done very, very well in this initiative. We have reached 100% of HEARTS implementation for hypertension management in all of our health centers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. That's 102 health centers. So that's a big task. And that HEARTS initiative and that model basically looks at getting away from polymedicine and going into like monotherapy or combination therapy with at max 2 pills. So it also, what's good about HEARTS is that it focuses on a chronic care model or a primary care model where we focus, and the ministry is actually doing this. Again, not new. We are not reinventing the wheel. All of this has actually been going on for quite some time. So they basically look at primary care. Those are the persons, the first line of defense, as you call it. And once we strengthen primary care, we prevent people from elevating towards hospital care, decreasing bed space, decreasing that type of management that we require on that level.
Sometimes it gets really bad, Dr. Bisoon, for example, with people with diabetes, where they have to lose a limb. When does it get to that level and how does it get there?
Okay, so I love this question and I'll tell you why. At the end of May, the Ministry of Health actually hosted a diabetic foot infection workshop where we invited key stakeholders from across the country, primary care, secondary care, public health partners, where we had a speaker coming from the UK, very well-known speaker. He actually is Trinidadian, but is studying away. And he did a very good presentation. We had our local doctors doing presentations within the local context. So we saw what was happening in terms of diabetic foot infection and broke up into these groups. And we're in the process of convening a second workshop where we would bring all the ideas together. Aim of that is to actually have evidence-based policies moving forward and treatment moving forward so that we have this standardized clinical approach to diabetic foot care across the country. Now, I always tell diabetic patients in terms of preventing these diseases, because as you know, diabetes can affect the entire body. The nerves are one of them, and that's key to what causes diabetic foot infections or limb losses, etc. Monitor, look at your feet. Just look at them. You have a shower, you just go down, you just look at your feet, you pull the toes, you make sure that you don't have any nicks or cuts or anything like that. Just be observant. Your health is in your hands as well. So you look, you feel, you ask a grandchild, if it's an older person and you can't see that well, come take a look at my feet. Make sure that you know how to cut your nails properly. Things like that. Prevention, like you said, is better than cure. And there are things that we can do.
Yeah. And Dr. Bisoon, final thoughts.
Yeah. So NCDs, big problem, but there are a lot of things that we can do, and there are a lot of things that the government is actually doing to prevent and help to manage our NCDs. Like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. It's a lot of stuff that's actually been happening already. It's just to tighten it up a little bit and to make sure that it's standardized throughout the country. So I do urge the Trinidad and Tobago population. We have something that's called TT Moves at the ministry. It's something that we revamped after the COVID-19 pandemic, where we ask you, eat healthy, eat your servings of fruits and vegetables, drink a lot of water, and get moving. That's important. Get moving, TNT. And that's what TT Moves is about. So I strongly recommend TT Moves when you see any of our initiatives. So now that we're moving from pandemic to endemic and we're learning to refocus after the pandemic, we are trying to relaunch and revamp the TT Moves initiative, starting with the signage initiative, which is basically where we put signage in all of the health centers throughout the country so that persons coming in can actually see a visual of let's eat healthy, let's drink a lot of water, let's get moving. In addition to that, we also, like I said before, pulse a lot of information under the TT Moves banner on social media, on the Ministry of Health website, just again to remind persons. There are a lot of other initiatives that's coming back. We want to revamp and bring back the 100% Wellness Challenge, which we are actually talking about. And essentially what it is, it's getting Trinidad to move. Let's move Trinidad and Tobago. TT Moves, moving. It's been successfully done in Jamaica as well. So again, another initiative that's not just in Trinidad regionally. So I think it's actually going to cause a big dent in terms of the mentality and the way that people think and manage their chronic diseases in Trinidad and Tobago.
Ms. Ash, final thoughts?
Okay, I'm talking about personal responsibility here. So as much as possible, look at, when we say diet, we don't mean restrictive. What we're saying is look at an entire balance, how much you eat, what times you eat, portion control as much as possible. Look at the various type of cooking methods available. Try different things, but at the same time, making sure that you have a good lifestyle in terms of holistic lifestyle. You have exercise to include in that part of your lifestyle as well. Make sure you get at least 30 minutes to an hour of exercise daily. Make sure that the kids go outside to play daily as well, because it's very important for their overall development and growth. So we have a lot to work with. Mental health again, right? And stress management. We're looking at those things. Smoking and alcohol consumption. Those are things that we really want to address as well in the country.
Dr. Bisoon, Ms. Ash, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Delving Deeper. Be sure to join us at the same time next week for another episode of Delving Deeper. I am Kimberly D'Souza, and on behalf of our entire cast and crew, have a good night.